Howdy, everyone, and maybe I should say ahoy, I don't know. But anyway, pushing past the cryptic maritime clue in this intro, I wanted to bring you another unexpected episode of the Company Road podcast. So I was scrolling through my LinkedIn over breakfast one day, and kids' noises everywhere. And you can imagine the scene. A lot of people are in this situation. It's basically industry news, new products, new tech. There's a rant, there's some AI, there's infographic, there's another rant, there's a survey. There's maybe some more AI kind of posts, and people are posting about the same sort of stuff, basically. And I saw this post, and I might actually read a bit of it out, which is totally unexpected for me. So like reading through this thing. Anyway, post reads, day 2, we got struck by lightning. It happens to sailboats, but it's rare. Something to worry about, not something to expect. Day 2 in the Bahamas, our prize after 6 months of toil. 6 months replacing all the electronics after the last lightning strike. Yet this boat has been struck twice. An insurance write-off we rescued last November. And then it goes on, and there's some interesting things in the post which you should see, and definitely link to it in the show notes. But the end of it is, so this is me now. I live on a sailboat, pushing remote working to its logical conclusion. I've been meaning to write one of these for months, partly so my mum knows we're still floating, perhaps as therapy, and definitely as a reminder that I'm in the market for freelance work. Because this boat won't fix itself, break out another 1,000, as they say. So it really jumped off the page. And after that, I thought, well, life on the sea, traveling the world, pushing remote working to its logical conclusion. I need to get this guy on the show. So basically, here he is. And this is like maybe a day or two after I saw the post. And Ben, you've been super kind in coming onto the show. And this wonderful person, Ben Mason, we actually connected like many years ago back in London. We were interviewing Ben for one of the roles when we were working in innovation consultancy back then. And Ben, you've tried many things in your life beyond boating. You do a lot of strategy work as a strategy officer and lots of things in between. You've like back in the day, you're quite an entrepreneur. Back in the day, you were on Dragon's Den even, and you were selling luxury baked beans to Duncan Bannatyne and the crew. And so like reading through this thing. Anyway, post reads, day 2, we got struck by lightning. It happens to sailboats, but it's rare. Something to worry about, not something to expect. Day 2 in the Bahamas, our prize after 6 months of toil. 6 months replacing all the electronics after the last lightning strike. Yet this boat has been struck twice. An insurance write-off we rescued last November. And then it goes on, and there's some interesting things in the post which you should see, and definitely link to it in the show notes. But the end of it is, so this is me now. I live on a sailboat, pushing remote working to its logical conclusion. I've been meaning to write one of these for months, partly so my mum knows we're still floating, perhaps as therapy, and definitely as a reminder that I'm in the market for freelance work. Because this boat won't fix itself, break out another 1,000, as they say. So it really jumped off the page. And after that, I thought, well, life on the sea, traveling the world, pushing remote working to its logical conclusion. I need to get this guy on the show. So basically, here he is. And this is like maybe a day or two after I saw the post. And Ben, you've been super kind in coming onto the show. And this wonderful person, Ben Mason, we actually connected like many years ago back in London. We were interviewing Ben for one of the roles when we were working in innovation consultancy back then. And Ben, you've tried many things in your life beyond boating. You do a lot of strategy work as a strategy officer and lots of things in between. You've like back in the day, you're quite an entrepreneur. Back in the day, you were on Dragon's Den even, and you were selling luxury baked beans to Duncan Bannatyne and the crew, and going up against a number of people and getting your beans into Fortnum & Mason. And you've tried a number of other things. But yeah, what has this got to do with entrepreneurs and the world of work, you might ask? Okay, so we've got the boats, we've got the beans, we've got to put this all together. I think we want to talk a bit about how far you can push remote working, how far you can, basically take your passion and focus on that, and then bring more of yourself back into work probably as a result, is probably where we'll get to. Ben, thanks so much for coming on the show. Welcome.
A pleasure. Thank you.
I don't know what kind of introduction was that, and how would you describe where you're at? Like, actually, where are you right now?
Yeah, emotionally or geographically? So geographically,
anyway, yeah, in Bahamas, yeah.
We bought the boat in Florida, spent 6 months fixing it, and sailed to the Bahamas 2 weeks ago, and then promptly got struck by lightning again. So we're currently stuck here fixing the boat again, which seems to be...
What happens when you get struck by lightning? Because I'm sure people are curious.
It can vary hugely. It can be really, really serious. Mostly humans don't get struck because boats have it's a sailboat, has a big metal pole sticking out the top. But the most serious is it can blow a hole in the bottom of the boat. That's very, very unlikely. The most recent strike was a very mild one. It killed a bunch of our electronics, 2 fridges, the autopilot. Expensive, but could have been much, much worse. The boat was struck by lightning before we bought it, and it destroyed every single piece of electronics on board.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's going to hurt. So for a remote worker, it could have started better. It's probably...
Well, I'm really glad the Starlink wasn't affected, because I realized I'm totally reliant on internet here, and I brazenly said, yeah, I can work from anywhere in the world, but I only have one way of connecting at the moment. So it's been a bit of a lesson, as I probably need some backups.
Yeah, great. This is where you've ended up. You're in the Bahamas, you're on a boat, you're in a cabin there.
Yeah, I'm in what they call the saloon. It's like the living room and kitchen in the middle of the boat. I plan to turn the cabin into an office at some point. The ideal would be to have air conditioning in there, because it gets pretty toasty at times, and have my screen and all that stuff, but we're not quite there yet. We do have running water and electricity and internet, which is much better than where we were 6 months ago. So
you can get your internet from anywhere in the world with the satellite connection. Is that how it works?
Yeah, it's super fast from absolutely anywhere. So that's a game changer, really, because I do freelance advertising strategy as my bread and butter, and that just enabled me to do that from anywhere, really.
Yeah, so we're putting these things together. So you're on a boat, you're doing this strategy work. You've obviously did the beans back in the day. You've done a few other things along the way. So maybe if you could just describe, I guess, the journey, and I don't know how far back you want to go. You could even start with the young Ben if you wanted to, and what characterized your outlook on life. How do these new things come about for you?
I think it's adventure that drives me. So it's adventure that is at the heart of all of this. So I didn't really enjoy school. I wasn't particularly good at school. I was diagnosed either dyslexic or dyspraxic, or suffered from a bang on the head. But that wasn't until university. So school was your constant experience of being told that I was smart but lazy. It just didn't make sense to me. I wasn't very good at it. But then first kind of career was in advertising, and I was very lucky, I think, to find places that they valued people that thought differently. And I think that I'd always struggled at school because I was trying to do things differently. I remember when a dyslexic tutor at school, at university, taught me how to write an essay, and I'd got all the way to the end of my third year at university without understanding how to write an essay, because nobody had ever explained it to me in a way that made sense. And when she explained it, I was just like, is it really that simple? I've been trying to write original thought with the whole career and was useless at it. And then I fell into advertising. Well, I didn't fall into advertising. It was quite hard to get in there. But I found a place where they value people that approach things differently. And I didn't think I'd stay in advertising very long, because I've always just wanted to start companies. That's what's always driven me. Right from my childhood, I just wanted to, they call it a founder now, called it an entrepreneur then. Who knows? That's what I wanted to do. And I think that was driven from a feeling of not fitting in organizations. School just felt like an anathema. I had friends and I liked that side of it, but I just didn't understand what they wanted me to put the paper. Just didn't, whatever I did just seemed wrong. So I never thought that I would work in a big organization. I thought I would have to create my own. So I was lucky that advertising agencies, and the one I ended up working at for 7 years, was a startup and felt like building a business. So I think it satisfied my entrepreneurial gene, I suppose, as you'd say. But then I left that and I started the Posh Baked Beans business, and that was in a few supermarkets in Dragon's Den, and ran that for 2 years. That eventually you just couldn't get traction in the big supermarkets. It was a fresh product, so it wouldn't ever survive without the likes of Tesco and Asda on board. So that was 2 years, just couldn't quite find product market fit, but learned a huge amount. Then I went traveling and sailing for a bit, funnily enough, actually. And then I was on the verge of moving to the US when the pandemic hit. My visa arrived in April 2020 after 4 years of applying for it. So I didn't go to the US, and that sort of frustration turned into starting a pizza delivery social enterprise built for COVID, really. Food delivery was booming, and so was poverty. So we started a pizza delivery business called Love Triangle, which gave a pizza to a local food bank donated a meal to a local food bank for every pizza we sold. So that was actually really fun and rewarding and amazing first year. And then year 2, we just got hit by crazy inflation with Brexit and COVID and Ukraine and all these crazy things happening. And that tanked the business at the end of year 2. And that was the moment I decided I didn't want to be running a business that tied me to a single postcode in South London at the very moment that it suddenly become like culturally acceptable to work from anywhere, really. I think that was a big cultural change in the pandemic. And so I thought I'll fast forward my dream of living and working, or living on a boat, because I think I can work from it now. So that's the whistle-stop tour of how I ended up here.
Yeah, I want to go back to some of those steps. I mean, that's sort of high-level view, but yeah, I mean, thinking back to you and how you were in some of those more organizational and maybe constrained environments in some sort of way. So yeah, maybe talking us through some of the things that you noticed about either the experience or yourself that made you feel this isn't quite right, or how are you responding to that, and how, as an entrepreneur, I guess, with that hat on, you were able to still maneuver in some way. So how did you go about that?
So the question is, how did I deal with the sort of challenges of organizations? It's funny, really. It always takes me back to school and university, where I just felt like I was in organizations that didn't fit, that didn't value what I did. And it's very difficult at that age to realize that, but I just didn't feel that when I did stuff that I thought they wanted, they didn't want it. And then it was just very rewarding to find advertising agencies where they wanted the opposite. They wanted people who were doing things differently and thinking in different ways. I guess I learned a lot in this sort of advertising world and agency world, because I learned how to write there, actually, I suppose. I wasn't allowed to do English GCSE, so I wasn't allowed to do English A-level because I couldn't write well enough. And now I get paid to write. And so it's funny how educational organizations didn't work for me at all, but employment setting of an advertising agency managed to inadvertently teach me how to write. And now I really enjoy writing and get paid for it, and is something, I'm proud of. So I don't know if I did much different. I tried really hard, to be honest, and I deliberately didn't try at school because I learned early on that it was better to be seen as smart and lazy than trying hard and stupid. By the time I got into advertising, I think I was just full of energy, and it was exciting and fun, and I tried really hard.
Yeah, I think the thinking differently is interesting. I was also in that situation, and thinking differently when everyone else is also thinking differently, it can feel quite hard at times. And I don't know, from a standing out point of view, from a differentiation point of view, whether you felt that in a competitive sense. Do you feel like there was always like somebody else that was trying to out-weird somebody else because it was, I'm going to take that totally different direction. But it was, I don't know, it felt like an incremental process a little bit. So somebody suggests this, I'm going to suggest this, and it gets more and more left field to the extent that it's out there, and then you converge on something that's sort of a bit more agreed upon. But I don't know, a lot of egos flying around. What was your experience?
Yeah, there can be, and I really have never had much time for that. It seems counterproductive, to be honest. We're social creatures. I guess that's where the egos come from. But working with fun, smart people is really fun, and I just enjoy everyone's input.
So I guess there's a pretty big change from obviously working in some of those environments to then working in an environment where you now control absolutely everything about your work and how you set things up. And what's been the process for that in setting it up in a way that you think works so far on the boat?
Don't know if it's working yet.
Yeah.
I guess I've been working freelance for over a decade now, 11 years, I think. And in that time, I've started 2 businesses. So I think the process of learning to work for myself in a really true sense has been very gradual over that time. And I think I've learned stuff about myself. I think a huge one about productivity, I think, is that learning, and this is, I think, that organizations tend to be terrible at, is nobody does 8 hours work in a day. And I might do 8 hours work on a really busy day with a deadline. You might do 10, 12, 16 hours, but you'll be absolutely destroyed for 3 days afterwards. I've learned to be very comfortable with the fact that most of the time, let's say, I'm just putting around the number, but say there's 4 good hours work in a day, and learning to do that when I'm feeling ready to work and productive. And I'll get more done in 3 productive hours than I will 8 hours that are forced on me. So I think learning to work when the work flows has been a big thing for me over the time. That's something that doesn't fit well in organizations. There are definitely some models, advertising agency models, which are built for freelancers, which are tackling that. One of my clients has been there, done that, and they're designed for freelancers, and they systemize everything. So it doesn't really, there's meetings and workshops to attend to, but the whole thing is structured for this type of working. It doesn't matter when you do the work, and it's very formatted rather than the more traditional way of sitting in an agency in London for 8 hours a day. So I think it's definitely been a journey of trying to figure out when I work and how I work. And then you put that into a boat and it becomes more complicated because you have to deal with weather and maintenance and other complications.
Tying knots, or all the things that you have to
Tying
do on
knots,
a boat.
exactly. Tying knots and pirates and things.
all of that. Climbing up the top. Do you have to climb up the top of the crow's nest and have a look? And I don't know.
We don't have a crow's nest, but I will have to go up the mast at some point, probably this week. I haven't been yet.
Yeah, right. How far is that? Is that a bit of a climb? You're not afraid of heights?
62 feet, which is 20 odd meters.
Yeah, it's a good distance.
We dragged anchor in Hare Bridge at 6 o'clock in the morning and broke some stuff up to the top of the mast. So I need to get up there and reattach it.
Oh, good. Well, if you know about your flow and how you can work on the work that pays in a more efficient way, then obviously that's going to help. You could say, I've got this time, I need to spend time doing the masts and things, and then you can come back to your work. I don't know, it's like a productive form of procrastination in a way.
True, I like that.
You've got things to do before you get around to it, yeah.
Yeah. I remember somebody saying to me, and this was a reference to advertising, but you never get any better. You just get faster as you get more experienced. I kind of like that. It's obviously not entirely true, but you definitely learn how to do the same stuff a lot quicker.
Oh, yeah. You can go fast, slow down in a way. So you can basically condense the time that you have to spend on something, because that'll then free up time outside of it. Yeah, as you were saying, it must be quite cathartic in a way, and just relaxing, doing some of those tasks that either you have to fix something or you have to plan a little bit, just the routine schedule of how you're getting around, where you're going, and that sort of constant, it's good. I don't know if it's the same as a creative team playing pool all day to come up with an idea in an office somewhere in Soho, but it's like you're doing something to take your mind off then maybe you're thinking about things as well at the same time.
I've not seen it like that, and it might well do. It hasn't felt like that for the first 6 months because it's been really overwhelming. So in a way, it's felt more like a startup, to be honest. So I think as an entrepreneur, you end up doing loads of things that you don't know how to do, because at the beginning you're doing all the jobs in the business and you don't know how to do most of them. And it felt like a really extreme version of that, because I'm not a mechanical person at all. I'm not handy. I could do computer stuff, but just the idea of taking an engine apart just seemed like something I would never do, but it's something you have to do on a boat. So I've been painfully dragging myself up that hill for the last 6 months, and it felt really overwhelming at times. So trying to balance the job around that, paid work around that, was tough. I take your point. I really hope there'll be a time when I can do the oil change on the dinghy engine and while cracking ideas for a client in the back of my head. That sounds great.
Yeah, asynchronous or subconscious, something will be happening in the background.
Of course, which is hugely important.
That's the dream, and then it's even more efficient because you're basically you are doing two things at once.
I can be drinking cocktails on the back of the boat while working.
That's it. But I suppose this whole process has probably tuned you into that a little bit. Do you find yourself in your thoughts maybe a little bit more than you would have been otherwise in a more fixed routine before?
I don't know, to be honest. I feel like now I'm feeling more comfortable with the maintenance side of the boat, and we've got the electrics working, and like it's a comfortable place to live, which it wasn't when we first moved on board. So I'm starting to relax more, and it's only, since coming to the Bahamas last 2 weeks, like really enjoying the environment. It was quite stressful in Florida, whether it's hitting bridges or bumping into other boats. It was quite an intense period. So yes, I think it's really stunning where we are now. Like, go out and you can see water's the most beautiful transparent water I've ever seen. And so there's definite advantage to that, of sort of like refreshing the brain, and you get sucked into a stressful situation with work, and then you can look around here and go, actually, life's good.
It must be stunning. I can only imagine. Yeah, just to have that available, I think, to you as a fallback and as a situation, really, it's amazing. It must be hard, though. It must be hard. It's a bit like when you take things out of context and you're talking about working as a freelancer and strategy work, and so you might be working on, I don't know, a nappy brand or somebody that, I don't know who it would be. You're working on a brief, and you're in the Bahamas and there's clear water, and there's something, it doesn't sit in that environment naturally. So how do you feel about that when it happens? In
a sense, I think that's the art of advertising, really, because the process is putting yourself into other people's heads and how they think and understanding them, and you're often selling things that you don't buy, or so that hasn't been difficult, I don't think. I think juggling many things has been more challenging. Just the kind of like juggling boat maintenance. Daily tasks are just harder on a boat, right? Making sure we have enough water. We make all our own electricity via solar, or we run the generator if that doesn't. So it's like you have to do everything. You have to do many of the things that a city does for you, using all our own sanitation, all that kind of stuff. So like juggling all of that with a freelance career, with boat maintenance. So that's been the challenge, I think, is knowing when switching mode, I think that's always the freelancer's challenge in a way. And actually context switching is harder. It's hard for a lot of people in general, but yeah, switching around, but also knowing when to stop with which part, how much time you're dedicating with which part. Because if you're in your relaxing state and your feet are in the water in the Bahamas, that's great. But part of you must be thinking, okay, well, what else do I have to do now on the boat? It's a bit like when you go camping, there's always something to do. Or in life, you just sit around the house, you're just walking around some of the rooms and you just see things that have to be done. And same at work. How do you settle that in your mind? Is it like you're fixing times of the day to do certain things, or are you're a bit more free and flowing with it? I'm still working with mostly European clients. So the time zone means that, and on a boat, you fall asleep early and wake up early because it gets really dark around here. So I tend to wake up early and then be online working pretty early with 5 hours ahead of me. So there's a definite rhythm to the day where it's like paid work comes first and then boat stuff comes later. Doesn't leave time for exercise, sadly, because I used to like to exercise in the morning.
Yeah, I guess you have to make adjustments.
Talking about rhythm, weather is a big thing on boats. Like we are so subject to the weather, and obviously the lightning strike story that I told you was an extreme version, but the potential of that can happen. You get thunder and lightning storms every few days at the moment around here, and with that comes really intense wind, which means you immediately have to be keeping an eye on whether the boat's moving when it shouldn't be moving, is the anchor dragging. So we live by the rhythm of the weather in a really like powerful, fundamental way. And so it's quite hard to balance that with the expectations of a client, for instance, because there was supposed to be a thunderstorm at the moment that we were going to record this. And I almost emailed you this morning going, it might be possible, it might not, because it could be like howling out here and you won't be able to hear a word I say, and I'll just look really stressed. But I've been watching the radar over the day, and it's the radar predicts where the actual rainstorm's going to move, and it's been dissipating. So I was like, I think we're going to be fine. And it's completely calm now, and we can hear each other. So the weather is our overlord, if you like.
Yeah, people talk about this in nature. You feel part of something bigger and connect to something bigger. It puts things into perspective quite neatly. And I certainly found this when
Fear does as well. Fear puts things into perspective really neatly. Like, you get quite scared sometimes on a boat because 30-mile-an-hour winds on when you're in a house in a city, you wouldn't even really notice. For us, that's intense. 40 mile an hour is dangerous. That would be a windy day on land. So you just have a different relationship with your environment. And so I guess there's two sides to it. There's the beauty of going out there and looking at this incredible water and feeling so lucky, and that can refresh you creatively. And then there's the like abject terror of other times, which is nature's way of making you pay for it.
But you were saying earlier that you identify as a bit of an adventurer. So maybe you could tell us a bit about your appetite or craving for risk or fear or something that's terrifying, adrenaline. I don't know. When did that all start for you?
I think I'm quite a risk-tolerant person. So my sister talks about type 1 and type 2 fun, and type 1 fun is like when you're having fun and in the moment you're like, yeah, this is really fun. And type 2 fun is when you're like having a real intense bundle of emotions. Then afterwards you're like, that was really fun. But in the moment you're probably feeling terror, fear. And so I think there's a type 2 fun thing going on. I just like to try things as well. I think that's probably where a lot of this stuff came from and has driven some of my entrepreneurial stuff, sometimes to a fault, really. I think I will do another startup, and I'm really hoping to do something that I have more experience doing, because I'm very drawn to new things, and new things are difficult because you don't know how to do it. I like learning, and I think that's driven a lot of this stuff with the boat. I'm learning a huge amount, sort of figuring out systems. I think that's the strategist in me, the advertising strategy in me, is like figuring out how things work and how they could be done better. That's a big part of managing a boat whether it's the sailing or the systems, or I like researching stuff and I like figuring stuff out. So I don't really know when that happened. I think it's quite a fundamental personality thing. Maybe the figuring things out has come from my career, but yeah, I think there's just a could this be done better drive going on, and just like wanting to try stuff. I remember somebody I worked with who's very insightful human described me as an experience junkie, which I thought was quite
When in your career was that? Was that after you'd done the beans and everything else, or was it
before beans? That was in advertising days. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it probably spurred you on, did it? Really made you do more.
It's like, yeah, that seems about right.
Got a reputation to uphold now, and you've taken it to the extreme, obviously, as you point out, with the freelance work and the boating and the remote working. So overall, you think remote working in this way is okay? Obviously, people are struggling with a regular Teams meeting from the kitchen or the lounge. You're doing it in the way that you are. How have you found the experience of doing it?
I think we could do a whole podcast just on that topic, really. I think remote working is very interesting, and I think it feels like it's like many things, COVID pulled it forward 15, 20 years. And then there was a backlash. You saw all the sort of Silicon Valley firms that hit the news demanding their employees come back in. And I've seen this battle happening everywhere. I feel like it's really possible. And there is a definite overhead. There's like an emotional and cognitive overhead of me living on this boat. It takes more effort and uses more of my energy and my brain to figure out living on a boat. Now, it should get a lot easier over time, but, if I'm being really honest, and, perhaps shouldn't be saying this publicly, but no, there's definitely an overhead there. But there's a huge overhead in commuting, cognitive and emotional overhead in commuting. So I don't think it's necessarily negative. I think it can totally work. Like anything new, it's really stressful at times, and figuring out how to do it. And I really wish I had a place to sit and work like I did in my flat in London. I had my place set up and I had my second screen, and I think that stuff's quite important, and I don't have that yet. So systems and processes and things can reduce that cognitive overload or cognitive overhead, if you like. But yeah, there's actually quite a lot of people doing what I'm doing, but I think it's just a subculture that you don't hear about so much unless you're in it. There are a lot of people running businesses. There's a lot of, it used to be like retirees and vagabonds doing this basically. And now there's families, there's remote workers, there's people running little businesses, big businesses, probably from boats. And then of course there's all the YouTubers as well, which I think have made it pretty famous. So
can you spot them? They're just doing something that I guess you're on your boat and you probably see it, and you can see things from a distance. You get a bit closer, you can start to see what's going on a little bit. Yeah, you must have met some interesting people in that respect. So from some of the ones that you're describing.
Yeah, and community is really important in this lifestyle because you can't do a lot of things on your own on a boat. And I don't know how to do so many things. And I meet a lot of really experienced people who are helping me. There's a guy flying out tomorrow to come and stay on our boat for a week and work as an engineer for 5 days, helping us fix the boat and fixing the boat. And I met him that morning that we dragged anchor and hit the bridge because we found some damage to our rudder. It turned out to be old damage, but he was our neighbour, and he said, "Oh, well, look, I'll swim down and have a look at it." And he swam down and fixed it there and then. He brought some waterproof epoxy, and so he swam down and fixed it. And that was how we met. And now he's saving us from this lightning strike. So community is hugely important and necessary, and I think that drives the community out here on the water.
Yeah, that's incredible. Just, if you find people with skill and willing to be able to help you out in one way or another.
Yeah, and people want to because they know it's difficult. It's interesting with the organizational thinking, really, because it's the loosest form of organization, really, the sort of boating community in an anchorage. It's very informal, but it's really necessary.
No, I really like that. I think that there are definitely parallels to the working world and how people present both confidence and, I guess, threat or fear within a business context. Sometimes I feel like the signals that you put out there can be really important in terms of what happens next. What are you laying down as the next step? What's the next natural step? And how should people respond to you? So if you're in a room and you're visibly distressed, then it might encourage people to respond negatively and in a hostile way or competitively. But it could also be incredibly opening for the conversation, the situation. Like people might want to come in and help you, like you've described, guys swimming down to help fix your boat. That's really cool.
Yeah, necessity drives a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And in terms of positioning yourself, how have you found people have received you working in this way in the working world when then, like I said, they're stuck in a tiny meeting room somewhere in East London and trying to brief you on this thing? How does that go down? You got your glowing tan, your feet are in the water in the Bahamas, cocktail on the side.
It drives a lot of conversation, put it that way. And there's certain meetings where having a meeting with someone the other day that was a more sensitive meeting, we say, someone I didn't know. And the person, my co-founder, I suppose, that had set the meeting up was like, can you just blur your background? Because people always see the kind of oak paneling all around me and they're like, are you on a boat? And then you lose the first 10, 15 minutes of the call talking about that. So I think there's a practicality of like, we need to get some stuff done. So let's not talk about the boat. But obviously that, I really appreciate that because it's nice to be doing something interesting that people remark on and want to talk about. So yeah, I was definitely careful when having calls with people in London at the beginning of the year where it was beautiful weather here and we all know what London's like in January. So I did a lot of like calls from small rooms rather than out with beautiful blue water. But mostly people are accepting on it. I think people find it interesting and exciting and they want to talk about it. I haven't had a negative reaction to it yet. We'll see if, I don't know, talking to more formal lawyers, investors, that type of thing, would it be an issue? I don't know. Perhaps there's a balance.
Yeah, there's ways to handle it if it happens. You can always change your background. You can get your meeting room in Slough background to bring up.
That's what I need, isn't it? I need to find...
You need that, yeah.
The corporate background.
Somebody would happily provide it to you, I'm sure, just at a depressing meeting space somewhere. But yeah, it's considerate of you to take the meetings in an indoor environment rather than outdoors sometimes. So you could be anywhere in the world. But yeah, maybe that's part of your kind of refurb. You'll think about how to arrange like the YouTubers and so on.
I'll get a green screen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you could be anywhere then. Yeah. One of the things we're talking about in this stage of the podcast is around growth and strategies for growth and personal growth and I guess organizational growth ultimately. But for people being able to almost spot what needs to be done for themselves and to move forward with that and to take a step. So from that point of view, I mean, obviously you've tried a lot of things and you do you're starting up ventures a lot and you've obviously done this on the boat. So from the point of view of, I guess, sharing some of your spirit and your mindset with people that are maybe thinking about, okay, making a move or how to grow in themselves a little bit more. Have you got any thoughts or perspectives on that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've learned is just to get on with it. That sounds slightly facetious, but I think there's a really powerful truth underneath it is that it's really hard to get anything done, whether you're working for yourself or in your big organization. Like inertia is your biggest enemy. And so just getting anything done. I wasn't a productive person for most of my life. And I feel like, God, maybe actually I am a productive person now some of the time. And I think just getting small things done, making some progress. And I think there's a decision-making thing there as well, is especially on your own. I think it's really hard to make decisions sometimes. I found as a solo founder, really difficult. I got my first employee and she was amazing because she just would take me out of this sort of mental fog of indecision, which I think is really easy to get stuck in. And I think making fast decisions and then seeing how they feel is another good way to just keep things moving. And I think that's everything really is actually moving. Everything we do has been done before in a way, really, in some form. Like we might be starting a really innovative business, but someone started a business like it in the past or a charity or whatever it is. Like everything's been done in some way before. So you can find the people that have done something pretty close and help you do it fast. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned over the years because it's so easy to get stuck.
How have you found the process of identifying some of those people or influencers that you think would help in that situation? Has it been, again, a bit of a trial and error? I'm going to try a few people out and see what works, or have you found yourself gravitating? So there's a lot of talk around bias, basically, and you you look for people that mirror your own attributes in some sort of way. But do you find that people like that point out the blind spots in a way are the most useful, or vice versa?
Yeah, I really like working with people that challenge me and think differently to me, and I find that really rewarding. I'm sure there's a whole load of bias going on. I think also, though, and this really applies to your entrepreneur's idea, is when you put yourself out there, people gravitate towards you. And that's another reason to just get something done, because we've always had, have a lot of people go, oh, I've got an idea for a business. And people project these ideas. They don't want to tell anyone because it's such a good idea that they can't bear to tell anyone. Someone might copy it. And I've always just thought the more you talk about something, the more likely it is to happen. The most likely thing is that it never happens. So I think, going back to your question about attracting people or finding the right people, when you do interesting stuff, people gravitate towards it and they see that you put yourself out there. I'm sure you found when you started Company Road, you started it, people were drawn to it and wanted to be a part of it because you'd gone out there and started it. And I just think that it's the same with this boat. By actually getting out here and doing it, one, boat people are happy to help me because they know how hard it was to get it done. And then I'm hoping that people will give me more freelance advertising work because they go, oh, that's interesting, getting stuff done and getting out there.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Definitely relate to that from the point of view of starting this podcast almost a year ago and just seeing with a bit of a punt where it might go. And obviously maybe to have like amazing conversations with people all the time. And this one today is awesome as well. But it's like, you wouldn't have expected it. You wouldn't have anticipated it. You couldn't have planned for it, but you're basically just, you're laying the roads and you're walking down it and you're seeing where it goes.
And there's a mindset thing there, isn't there, that I think is really interesting, because I'm sure we all feel this sort of imposter syndrome is too strong a term for what I mean, but we all feel like we don't know what we're doing when we start something. But you came to me and you're like, I've got a podcast. Do you want to be on it? I'm like, awesome. He's a podcaster. Of course I want to be on it. Whereas I'm sure when you were starting, you didn't feel like a podcaster a year ago, just as I didn't have any idea what I was doing on a boat. But once you put yourself out there, you're learning really fast and other people are going, oh yeah, they are that person and they're really good at it. It's sort of a self-validating cycle.
It's funny. It's now all people ask me about, which is like a really weird thing because I am consulting and doing other things on the side, various other projects, recording a music album at the minute as well. But it's like, yeah, about the podcast, we go back to that in the chat. It's like, yeah, people just want to talk about it, which is great. It's a connection point, isn't it? You find commonalities through those things. And I think the more creation that you do and put out into the world, obviously, the more people, I guess the greater chance for connection is. There'd be more coverage in a way. If people wouldn't spend that amount of time with me on any other day, they could tune into that and probably get more from me than they would if they met me for coffee for 20 minutes. I don't know. It's an interesting one.
I like it. I think it's cool.
And I think that we've talked about creativity, talked a bit about influences. One of the things is maybe around choice and maybe the illusion of choice, because, you and I, in our situations, can choose what we want to work on most days. I think that process itself is a little bit alien, a little bit foreign to a lot of people from the point of view of choosing what to spend time doing. How do you tackle that? How do you go about it?
There's a sort of more philosophical level to that, which is, I think, I really value my own time now. I don't mean that financially, like how many years have I got left and what do I want to do in that time? And that drives me a lot. And there was a kind of like realization of, why do I want to wait 10 years to live on a boat? I want to do it now. And I think that sort of falls right down to day-to-day stuff. Like, I want to enjoy today and value today and choose what I want to do today. I couldn't imagine going back to not being in control of my everyday, really. I really value that. It comes with a lot of stress, financial insecurity, not knowing what you're going to be doing next week, never really getting a day off because you have to work when the work comes. So there's a cost to it, but I really value, I love slow mornings. I love going like, you know what, I'm just going to sit and have my coffee and sit for an hour before starting work. I love that sense of freedom, but it comes with stress and insecurity.
Yeah, I think the balance is a really important point because the grass is always greener as a concept. you take a step into these worlds where you think, okay, I'm living on a tropical desert island, or I'm doing this on the boat, or
I dream about a monthly salary sometimes.
yeah. Just something.
Just to know that the money's coming in there. But I also know I wouldn't last long.
Well, you've got to put it out there, like they say, put it out into the universe, see what comes back. Yeah, monthly salaries. What would you love to be doing on a monthly basis in a dream world? It's not just like you need the money to pay the bills, but if it's that kind of thing, you were talking about another startup idea, whether it's freelance work or it's something else, how are you forming that in your mind? And are you working actively to try and push towards that dream next?
There will hopefully be another startup quite soon. I'm working on something with a couple of people. Came sooner than I expected. I was really burnt out after the last one, after the pizza one of COVID, because I ended up working office hours in advertising stuff and then evenings and weekends on the pizza business. And we had 65 employees. So it was intense, and it took some time to recover from that. And I guess the boat became the new startup, as in it was challenging and all-consuming and risky, and it was ticking the same boxes and set a lot of the same feelings. But I just still have that sort of ticking inside me, and still have that drive. I think it probably will affect, if it goes well, it'll affect our sailing plans. I'll need to be on the right time zone. I need to be more available. But, can I build a team from this? But we'll build a remote business, and everyone will be remote. But it's very different. It's one thing turning up as like the creative freelancer. Yeah, I live on a boat and it makes me interesting and perhaps more hireable, to like, can I manage a team of people that are living on a boat and motivate them and it'd be cool? Don't know, but I hope so and I believe so.
Well, they made the radio station on the boat, didn't they? So you might be able to get some other people who also live on boats to converge in an agreed space at an agreed time. And there could be like a sort of armada, flotilla kind of scenario.
Well, I remember listening to a podcast with the founder of 37 Signals, who make Basecamp and other things. And he's big on remote working. And he said, you either need a majority site-based company or you need a majority remote company. You can't blend the two. It's too difficult. But whatever money you save on that office downtown, spend it on travel to bring people together. Core teams meet once a month, departments meet once a quarter, and the whole company gets together once a year. And I thought that was really insightful. And who doesn't want to work for a company that's going to fly them to cool places and spend money on that rather than a really expensive office in the middle of London, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think reinvesting against your P&L, you can see it in your new light, can't you? It's like, if that frees up this money, then, what can we do with it? And how imaginative could you be with it?
Yeah. And I think company culture flows down always from the top, whether it's a big established corporate or it's a startup. You often see the way everybody behaves is influenced by whether it's the personalities of the founders or the environment or something. But I guess hopefully maybe can build an organization which is motivated by the same things that motivate me. I don't know if it'll motivate me and my co-founders, I'm not sure. But that would be really, really cool, to take the same sort of sense of adventure and like it's possible, and see how that thrives in an organizational setting.
And I think tying that to the point that we were making before around putting yourself out there and creating, obviously I feel that kind of expression, it starts the conversation already around what people need, what they value, what they expect, where they sit, where they want to be, what are their dreams, all of that sort of thing. Can be a bit forced in a usual kind of, let's sit down and discuss your personal objectives and your personal development plan. And that kind of setting can be a bit like, we'll just talk about the work. But if you're trying to get to a deeper level and actually engage your employees and you're trying to build out something that's motivating on a higher plane, then I think some of the things that we talk about probably help with that.
And I think it comes back to your entrepreneur thought, which is I've always preferred laissez-faire management styles, entrepreneurial environments where I'm just given a problem to solve and get on with it. And that's suited my personality. And I hated being told specifically how to do something and follow the tasks. It just didn't suit me. But I found as a manager, I do the same thing. I give people huge rein and I'm there to support them when they need it. But I give them the problem and give them as much space as they want to solve it. So I guess that's the organization that I would like to build because it's the one I'd like to work in. the one that has entrepreneur spirit at its core of its culture.
That's interesting because like some people don't always react as well to kind of the open challenge, the open brief. I think giving people that rein is like for the right character, it's a good thing. Obviously, incredibly motivating. Other people want a bit more direction. So have you found yourself having to manage that a little bit?
Definitely had moments where people have been a bit like, can you just help me a bit more? Can you tell me how to do it?
Give me something.
Yeah. I remember when we were talking about seating, flexible seating, one of those small things that becomes really important in an office. And there was a real hard divide between the people that didn't mind coming in the morning. And we were at the time when the agency was growing so fast, we actually ran out of seats. So you had to get in early if you wanted a seat because there weren't enough for everyone. Some people found that really stressful. And I also thought it was the same people that liked a lot of structure. They liked their seat and they liked their files organized. Whereas there was a certain type of person that came in, opened the laptop, didn't really care where they were perched. Definitely a sort of hard cultural dividing line.
Differences. I think you just got to be aware of those differences and what people want. That all sounds really cool. I think there's probably a point to wrap on here, which is really just around where you are now, where you're going next, what are you going to do, where are your travels going to take you, what kind of work do you want to be doing, anything like that.
So the dream is get freelance work flowing in steadily to getting this boat fixed. Spend the next few months sailing around the Bahamas, probably till the winter. Bahamas, maybe across to Mexico. I'd like to sail across the Atlantic next summer or next spring and come back to Europe and then be based in Europe for, I don't know, a few years, depending on what happens with work and startups and stuff. Just cruising around the Med, more seasonal over there, so find somewhere warm and cheaper for the winter to winter the boat and then spend the summers cruising around the Med. And then who knows? The long plan is to sail all the way around the world over the next decade. I have no idea how I'll balance that with work because I may have internet connection in the middle of the Pacific, but I'll be on a completely different time zone to the entire rest of the planet. Maybe you can help me from Australia, actually.
Yeah, swing by. Definitely. Yeah, we'll sort it out. Can't help you with any boat skills, but I'll give you something else that might be helpful.
But yeah, that's the dream. Sailing and building businesses.
Never thought I'd heard those two things in the same sentence, and in with remote working and all the things you described. Yeah, I just really appreciate the chat and coming on with such an open spirit and just an open mind to this kind of random conversation, but I think a really helpful one from the point of view of perspective, because we're all stuck at work. You're out at an amazing place. And I think perspective is really important sometimes.
Stuck at work.
Yeah, you're at work. We'll convince ourselves of that. But I think
I can't even raise my anchor at the moment because of the lightning strike. So I'm genuinely stuck here.
But yeah, thanks so much, Ben. And yeah, if you do meet any other interesting people on your travels, pirates or anybody else that you think we should, talk to on the show, then definitely let me know.
I'll pass them on.
Thanks so much, Ben.
Thanks, Chris. Really good talking to you.